And I'm happy to talk about any topic that is on your mind. Really, I'm very much of an open book, so happy to talk about anything. And so since we aren't able to do this in person, I thought the best way to kind of share my story and talk about my Air Force journey and what led my family and I to Alaska was to do that in pictures. So I've got a couple of slides with some pictures and kind of talks about my journey, where I've been in the Air Force, and what I consider the most important aspect of my life, and that's my family. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, I'll go ahead and get started. So this is kind of my story in 3 slides, if you will. The pictures tell a little bit about where I'm from. So I grew up in New England. I'm from Connecticut, a small town called Bristol. If anyone is a sports fan out there, you may have heard of it. That's where ESPN headquarters is. Small town. My mother, my grandmother, and I all went to the same high school. In fact, some of my teachers, my mother had at a very young age, and when I had them, they were at the twilight of their career. I'm an only child. I am the daughter of a Navy veteran and the granddaughter of both an Army and an Air Force veteran. But my dad had separated from the service long before I was born. And so I didn't grow up in a military family. I just knew that the military was part of my life. And actually, at a young age, I wanted to be a lawyer. Sandra Day O'Connor was one of my role models, a person that I looked up to. And when I was 9 years old, at a St. Anne's Catholic School, for career day, I took my dad's old backgammon set and I emptied out all of the pieces, and that was my briefcase. And I had a little coat and a little skirt, and I went to school as Sandra Day O'Connor when I was 9 years old. So for that, my career was supposed to take me to be a lawyer. And I did 4 years of Latin in high school and 4 years of Latin and 4 years of Greek in college. And then right at my senior year of college, when I was pursuing ROTC, getting ready to commission and join the Air Force, while also considering going to law school, my trajectory changed very much unexpectedly. But my mother told me everything happens for a reason. And so I went on my way with the Air Force, and here I am now, almost 24 years later. And I don't look back and regret anything that's happened along the way. But I wanted to stay close to home, but not too close to home. And so I went up the road a couple hours to New Hampshire at the University of New Hampshire, where I studied classical languages and political science. And that's where I joined Air Force ROTC. And that's where my Air Force career started from. If we can go to the next slide. So as mentioned, my career has spanned from Florida, including tours in Hawaii, a couple of times overseas. So I won't go through every single stop along the way, but I have had the opportunity to serve overseas in England, where my oldest son was born. I spent 2 years on the island of Guam. I actually had 2 assignments in Hawaii. They were separated by a trip to Washington, D.C. So when we got the opportunity to go back to Hawaii, we were very excited. For my kids, they have grown up in a military family, and all they know is moving around. My oldest, who you'll meet on the next slide, is a sophomore in college. He goes to Grand Canyon University in Arizona. And he said, you know, Mom, when I graduate college, I will have lived in the same place for 4 years. That's something I've never done in my entire life. And so it helps with perspective, because we've usually moved around every 2. We've had a couple of tours where we've been somewhere for 3 years, but we typically move around pretty frequently. But I have been blessed. I had an opportunity. I taught at Colorado State University. You see the emblem there. I was an ROTC instructor when I was a young captain. I got to spend a year teaching leadership and ethics. And so I'll talk a little bit about that when I get into my philosophy with regarding leadership. I've had wonderful opportunities with the Air Force to serve on the Joint Staff. I spent a tour at the United States Pacific Command, now known as Indo-Pacific Command, in Hawaii. That photo of the building with the rainbow I actually took with my iPhone, so that's not superimposed or anything. That's a legit photo from the parking lot of the building. I also attended the Naval War College for a master's program, and I attended the National Defense University, where I studied resource and strategy. Spent a tour in Iraq. It's the picture down at the bottom left of your screen. I spent about 5.5 months in Iraq. My background is in human resources. In the Air Force, we refer to that as personnel. But my job when I was in Iraq was to keep track of everyone, where they were located, and unfortunately to provide support if we had any casualties. I had the opportunity to command a couple of times. I did my intermediate command, which for anyone who is affiliated with the military or understands Air Force structure, I was a squadron commander, which is roughly anywhere between 200 to 400 to 500 people. I did that at in Hawaii at what is now known as Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. I was a group commander, which is similar to a brigade for the Army. I was in Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs. That's where my family and I came from before we came to JBER, and now that I'm here with the Air Base Wing and the installation team here at JBER. So that's kind of almost 24 years in a quick summary. So we can go to the next slide. So this is a little bit about my family. So I have 3 children. My oldest was born in England. He is my redhead. And that upper left photo there, that's me and my 3 children. My husband is not pictured. I'll explain in a moment why that is. But my oldest, as I said, will be 20 next week. He's a sophomore in college. My son Lucas is 11. He is in 5th grade. Incredibly excited about the opportunity to go back to school next week. And my daughter is 5, and she's in kindergarten. We've been navigating online kindergarten for the last year. So anyone that has children that's been navigating online schools, I can assure you that I understand the challenges associated with that. My husband also wears the uniform. He was active duty for a while, and challenges with both of us being on active duty. So he joined the reserves. He is an intel officer by trade. He's also a civilian flight instructor in his civilian life. He's from Colorado, so he's not a New England Patriots fan like I am and my children are. But he has balanced his military career, his civilian flight career, and also being a stay-at-home dad. And so what I like to highlight on the bottom left there, when I was in a job on the PACOM staff, as I mentioned, I traveled a lot. And it was Valentine's Day. My daughter was 3 in that picture. And it was the first time she was going to get to exchange Valentines at the preschool program that she attended. And I think I was in Singapore or Korea. I was somewhere, and I wasn't able to really connect with my husband. So he had sent me an email, and he said, we have to do a box for Valentine's. He's like, I have no idea. And I said, hey, I'm sorry. I wish I could help you. I would just Google. And so my husband discovered Pinterest. And that is the final product there of he and my daughter making her box for Valentine's. And so I am incredibly blessed by a supportive husband who knows what it means to serve his country, but also know what sacrifice is, as he has taken a knee several times over our journey together to stay home with our children. And so one other thing I'll highlight, so you saw a photo of my mom in that first slide. There's my mom and my son in sunglasses. As I said, I was an only child. My mother taught me at a young age the value of realizing that everything happens for a reason. Even sometimes we don't understand it, but that's really the definition of faith. And so my mother had wanted to take my oldest on a cruise, and we had been putting it off. Like I said, we had spent so many times overseas. And so when we had moved to Virginia, she was in Florida, so it was relatively close. Long story short, we were supposed to take a cruise on my son's birthday, which is in January, and I was pregnant with my daughter, and I read the fine print, and I wasn't able to travel with that far along in my pregnancy. So we moved that trip up to that October. So it was October of 2014. And we went on this trip, and it was a great opportunity. And then less than 2 months later, my mother died. Completely unexpected. She woke up one day and she had a brain aneurysm. And so everything happens for a reason, because if I wasn't pregnant with my daughter, we would have waited to take that trip until January. And as circumstances happened, we wouldn't have been able to do that with my mom. So I share that not to make anyone feel sad or sorry for me for anything. It's just, it helps reinforce that we need to live in the moment, take advantage of the opportunities in front of us, and remember that everything does happen for a reason. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about leadership because that's, I think, one of the things that we would like to accomplish during our time here today. And again, I answer any questions you have about my journey or my family or any of those type of things. So there's so many things that I have valued over the years, and the teachers that I've had, the influencers that have been in my life, mentors that I've had. We know we're going to talk a little bit about mentorship, but one thing I will say about mentors is they come in all shapes and sizes. It's not always somebody that is superior to you. It's not always somebody that has more experience than you. It's not always somebody who's older than you. I have found in my life, really, in my military career and in my civilian life as a wife and a mother and as a Christian, that people have influences on my life. And so I really encourage folks to take note of the people that are influencing your life, and don't underestimate the power of your influence. It might not have a direct impact on the person that you're having a conversation with or the person that you're connecting with, but maybe that person will then carry it on with somebody else. So this is just a snapshot, not all inclusive by any means, but I have, from a young age and a young foundation in the military, without a doubt, you treat everybody with dignity and respect. There's no room in any organization for anything less than that. I believe in having a positive attitude. I think attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference. Even the most difficult of situations can be overcome based on your perspective. Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's challenging to dig deep. But I do believe in the power of positivity and having a positive attitude. I absolutely have benefited from an environment of growth and opportunity. And I do have several mentors. As I mentioned, I have formalized mentors, if you will, people that have grown up in the human resource community that I've been a part of. I've had other military women that have been mentors to me. And I've had individuals in my life as a mom and navigating what it means to be a Christian woman. And so I believe it's very important to create opportunities for others. Simon Sinek has said that leadership is the ability to let others around you rise. And I believe in the power of that statement. And I think it's very important that when we look at creating opportunities for growth in others, that we step back and say, hey, you know what, right now it's probably not a good thing for the organization, or maybe it's not a good thing for me if this person goes off and takes this developmental opportunity, or they take that different position in a different part of the organization, or they take a position with another company. But I think it's important to realize the larger picture and what will come from giving people an opportunity to take advantage of those developmental opportunities for growth. Be accountable and hold your people accountable. To me, that's a no-brainer. Whether it's in life or whether it's in the military, we definitely need to be accountable for our actions. My husband and I try to be accountability partners for one another when it comes to decisions about raising our children. I have a very good friend that has helped me strengthen my faith, and she serves as my accountability partner. And so I say accountability comes in many shapes and sizes. Operate as a team. I mean, you have to have everybody's back. I don't know anyone that works in an organization that would offer something counter to the effectiveness of teams. The challenge with teams is not everyone has the same level of initiative. Not everyone has the same level of skill. So how do you capitalize on individual strengths, and how do you help people overcome their limitations? I personally don't like the word weakness. I focus more on limitations because we can help people overcome limitations. We can equip them with training. We can equip them with self-confidence. So what can we do to help people overcome those limitations? I think it's for anyone, but particularly for individuals in leadership positions, you need to be able to keep your emotions in check, and you have to have outlets. What does that outlet look like? For everyone, it's different. Some people, they need to run. They're athletically driven. Other people, it's reading. Other people, it's I work all day. I have 500 people talking to me. I have 4 children at home. I just need quiet. So whatever that looks like for you as an individual, I encourage you, find your outlets and create space for you to go to those, because the last thing that we want in in any type of a scenario, whether it's parenting or whether it's in the professional workplace, are leaders who aren't able to keep their emotions in check. Work-life balance is this phrase. I personally am not a fan of work-life balance because I will tell you there are days when I am doing really well as being an Air Force colonel and taking care of my responsibilities, but I'm not doing so great on the home front. And there are other days where I'm just crushing it as a wife and as a mom, but I'm not hitting the mark on the professional side. And so I don't like to categorize it as a balance, but it's more what I call personal resiliency and personal fitness. What does that mean for you? For some people, again, it's physical fitness, emotional, mental fitness, spiritual fitness. What does that look like? And so I try to encourage people to find your level of personal fitness to help you strike whatever balance it is that you're trying to do within your life. And I think we focus on work-life balance as an idea and as a concept because it kind of rolls off our tongue. Lots of folks in industry and in the private sector use that as well. I just personally think that there's a better way to capture it for me. And that's why I encourage folks, find out what works for you, because if you don't have your tank full, so to speak, you're not going to be any good to yourself, and you are no good to your unit. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is the last one. Again, I wanted to just provide something to kind of capture your attention rather than just chatting initially. And so I get a lot of questions say, hey, you could have retired years ago. Why is it that you still serve? And really, it's right there on the slide, but I'm here because there are others depending on us to take care of them. I take a lot of pride in being a support officer in the military. I admit when I first wanted to join the Air Force, I wanted to fly. That was my goal. I had horrible vision, and I was not able to get any sort of waiver. Thankfully, with the advent of technology, after I came back from Iraq, the Air Force corrected my vision. Now I have perfect vision. By that point, I was far too old to do any sort of aviation career. But I take a lot of pride in having the ability to serve others. And that quote there at the bottom has had several folks that it's been attributed to. I know Ronald Reagan has said it at a time or two in some speeches, but it says there's no limit to the good you can do as long as you don't care who gets the credit. And I believe in that motto, is that we can do good for folks as long as we aren't concerned about individual recognition. And one of the questions that came up that I'm happy to talk to you are about challenges that I face and what are some of the things that you've done to overcome those challenges. And I think for me, just remembering why I chose to raise my right hand and swear an oath to defend my country and support the Constitution helps me understand why it is that after all these years, I take pride in getting up in the morning and putting a uniform on and doing my part in service to my country. And part of that is because the jobs that I've been able to have enable me to serve others. So I thank you for the opportunity to just kind of share some basic thoughts and talk with you a little bit about my journey and how my family and I came to Alaska. Like I said, we arrived last summer, so we've only been here for about 6 months or so. Lots of things that we have been able to do, certainly several things that we have yet to be able to do, as all of us have navigated the COVID environment for the last 10 months or so. And so we are optimistic about what 2021 is going to bring, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much for extending me the opportunity to participate. And I'm happy to answer any questions or hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. I'll open it up for questions, and just in the meantime, would you mind turning on your camera? It seems to have gone off. I know folks would love to see you.
It was fun hearing the fighters behind you throughout your presentation.
Hello.
Did you, can you see me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. Yeah, it was funny because I have to try to make sure I talk loud enough because I'm not sure how much you can hear through the sound when the planes are taking off. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a handful. First question, I'll kick it off and then I'll open it up to our participants. Is what was your reaction when you found out you were going to JBER in Alaska?
Honestly, I I've wanted to have an assignment to Alaska for many, many years, but my husband has wanted to come to Alaska for as long as I have known him. When I came back from Iraq in 2008, we came to Alaska on a cruise, and we got to do all the wonderful things that you get to do on a cruise. We went glacier kayaking, and we went canoeing and salmon fishing, and we took a helicopter and got dropped in the Yukon and took a 5-mile hike, and it was amazing. He's like, we are moving to Alaska. And I said, whoa, buddy, this is July and we're wearing coats. I said, we live in Texas. I said, I'm totally open to moving to Alaska, but let's try to get an assignment there before we just, because he was ready to pack up everything and just move here. And so I was really hoping to come to Alaska in 2018 when I was leaving Hawaii. There was an opportunity for me to come here, but we ended up going to Colorado Springs. And honestly, I thought my opportunity to get stationed in Alaska had passed because this position that I'm in is a very, very competitive process. And I did not have the confidence, I will say, that I had the qualities or the attributes to make the list to even be considered, just because of how few people get this opportunity. And so when I made the candidate list to be a wing commander, anyone that asked me, where do you want to go? I said, I want to go to JBER. I said, and here's why I'm qualified to go to JBER. I said, I've had 3 other assignments in the Pacific. I've been on the Pacific Headquarters Command. I know the AOR, all this kind of stuff. I had done a joint base. This is a joint base with the Army, so I had joint base experience. Anyway, I was not shy with anyone that was asking where I wanted to go. And so when I got the phone call, I was floored. I actually, probably you see it in movies, I'm on the phone with my boss and I don't say anything. He's like, are you there? And I was like, yes, I am here. I'm just processing. And so we are just so incredibly thrilled for the opportunity to be part of this team here at JBER, but also for the opportunity to live in Alaska. And my husband says we're not leaving, so we'll see if that's our future. But we just are amazed at the hospitality that we have received, even in light of COVID, just the connections that we've been able to make, and just honestly the beauty of Alaska. A year ago at this time, I was looking at my phone and I was like, oh gosh, I'm not going to make it. Like I'm not going to make it. And honestly, the darkness doesn't bother me. And my husband says there's no cold weather, there's just cold clothing. So I just bundle up. My kids absolutely love it. We get out as much as possible. We've been hiking in the winter time, and my kids skate and play hockey, and we taken advantage of several of the outdoor rinks. And so we really are enjoying ourselves. And I can only imagine what else is out there that we've yet to take advantage of just because of the restrictions that we've all been living under for the last year.
Mm-hmm. I love hearing people when they say they love it up here. I'm born and raised here, so that always makes me feel good. I'll open it up. Who else has a question in the room? Go ahead and just
Hi,
unmute.
ma'am. This is
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Rob. I've got a question, and I'm sure in your role you have a lot of information coming at you from a lot of different sources, and a lot of times that information is presented to you in meetings. So I guess I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how you manage your meetings and how you try to keep folks on point and focused in your meetings to stay on track with what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think we all could probably share some ideas on how meetings have changed in the last year, and how some things have evolved, and some of the technologies that we've leveraged. But if I go back to kind of the traditional meeting that I grew up in, is I think you need to start with an agenda, right? Even if it's a weekly staff meeting, there needs to be an agenda. There needs to be a list of things that you're going to accomplish, and if you have tasks or decisions that need to be made, I like to put those up front, right? Let's spend the time to talk about them. I also think it's helpful for decision makers to know if the purpose of the meeting is information or the purpose of the meeting is decision. So the decision maker can get themselves in the right frame of mind. Is it, hey, do I just need to listen, be mindful, and ask questions, or do I, more active listening because the expectation is we're going to walk out of here with a decision? So I think that's important to lay out up front. And in those meetings where it is a decision, I think it's okay if time will allow to walk out of a meeting without making a decision if there are unanswered questions or if there are elements that need further refining. Now, again, in my experience, that's not always the case. There are times when you are compressed for whatever the circumstances are to make a decision. And at that point, there's a little bit of trusting your gut. Going in with the 85% solution and then making a decision and sticking with it. But if I go back to kind of the framework for a meeting is the agenda, what the purpose is, key points, and then I'm a collaborative person, and so I believe that there is an opportunity for all participants, even what I like to refer to the folks in the cheap seat, right? Their position doesn't enable them to have a seat at the table, so to speak, but they're the ones that typically are the folks behind the principals doing the work, coming up with the good ideas and giving them an opportunity to share their perspective. And I found, particularly in the military, that's challenging. I would offer probably the same in the private sector, that some folks are hesitant to share their perspective because of the level of rank, if you will, in the room. And so I think creating an environment where people feel comfortable to share their perspective is also important. I know some people are, hey, the meeting starts and stops at this time, no exceptions. I'm not one of those type of people. I have worked with and for some of those. That is an effective way to do things, but I tend to also look at a meeting, particularly in the advent of COVID, as a way to connect with people. And so while the meeting has an official purpose, let's get through the official purpose. But if we can take just a few minutes and use this as an opportunity to connect with people. Connections is one of my personal priorities. It's a priority that I put in place here for this organization. And I find a way to build those meaningful connections is to take advantage of any opportunity. And I'll be honest, I don't know how many employees you have in Alaska Communications, but in our organization, we have about 5,000 people. And I tell people, when I get a chance to meet with them, this may be the only time I get to have a conversation with you. And so I want to take advantage as much as possible to know as much about you. So if I see you someplace else, or if I'm in another meeting with you, we have that connection. Probably a little bit more challenging in large organizations than in small businesses. But I don't want to walk out of a meeting without at least taking the opportunity to do that. But I am also mindful of people's time. So I think there's a balance in there. But if I had to summarize it up, I would definitely, what's the objective of the meeting? What's the intent? Have an agenda, stick with it as much as possible. But if you do have an opportunity, encourage that crosstalk, particularly when it comes to decisions. Thank you for the question.
So we have a question that came up in the chat. We're wondering, what does a military intelligence officer do?
Oh, so they do a variety of things. And so we'll take here at JBER, right? You hear the jets flying overhead. We have military intelligence folks that are embedded in our flying squadrons. And they're really looking at what the threats are, whether it's geographical threats based on terrain, or if it's adversary threats from other countries. And then there's also different levels of intelligence. And so my husband has spent a lot of time focusing on signal intelligence, so information obtained from satellites. He's worked with the National Security Agency. He's worked with the Defense Intelligence Agency before. And so I will say there are some things that we cannot talk about in his job just because of the level of classification at which he operates in. But it's you probably hear, Hollywood does a decent job, I would say, capturing what an intelligence professional does. Sometimes it's staring at a screen and discerning a lot of information. But really, it's being keenly aware of what's happening in your surrounding and kind of compartmentalizing information and providing it to decision makers as a factor in making decisions and going forward. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. So you talked about the power of a positive attitude and leading with a positive attitude. This last year has been pretty rough for a lot of people. How have you maintained that leadership skill, and have you adjusted at all? Has it been difficult to lead with a positive attitude? Any tips you have would be appreciated.
Yeah, so absolutely. I was actually just talking with one of our PA professionals, Lieutenant Goss, about how sometimes it's hard to continue to dig deep, right? We talk about resiliency, we talk about personal fitness, and I think for me personally, how to maintain that positivity is finding the joy in your circumstance. And so for those of you that are call Alaska home or have lived here for many years, you can understand this. And so lots of questions I get from people is, oh my gosh, really, you only have 5 hours of sunlight a day? Like, what is that like? And so there was a day in December, it was right before the solstice, and it was beautiful. The sun had come up and it was gorgeous. And I took a picture, and all the trees were just like a Christmas card covered in snow, and the snow was glistening. And I shared a post on my personal Facebook page, and I said, sunset or sunrise was like 10:15 or whatever it was. And I said, sunset is, 3:40 or whatever it was that day. And I said, perspective, the sun rose today. And I shared the picture, and I said, here's to finding the joy in your circumstance. And so I try to find the positives in the circumstances in which we have. And that's hard to do. I'm not going to say that I've not been discouraged over the last year. My family moved during the middle of the pandemic. We had all these plans for these things that we were going to do. We found out in August of 2019 that we were moving here. So we had about a year to plan, and all these great things that we were going to do along the way. And of course, we had to modify those changes. And so while we didn't get to go to Banff or go to this place in Canada or that place, we tried to just enjoy what we could. And so we counted animals versus, stopping places here and doing things. And so I think just realizing the circumstances that you're in and finding the joy and the positives with what you have. And then really just remembering that, yes, while things are hard and things are challenging, there could be so much more that's being thrown at us. And I think as we try to encourage people that are struggling. I mean, when my mother died, it was 4 days before Christmas. She was coming to visit us. I had just spoken to her. I was pregnant with my daughter. I mean, there was a whole lot going on in my life at that moment. And as difficult as that situation was, the fact that I had just seen her 6-7 weeks prior and got to go on this trip with her, I tried to focus on the positives. And so it's not easy, I recognize, and not everyone has the ability to do that. And I don't want to be that super positive person in the room that people are like, man, just say it sucks, because it sucks. And there are some times when you just have to say, you know what, it's just, you're right, it's not a good situation, but here's what we can do together. So I guess just trying to find the joys in your circumstances.
Thank you.
The lines of positivity, what are some of the informal ways you recognize your organization, your team, your soldiers?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times people just want to be acknowledged and they want to be heard. And I think spending the time to get to know someone and connect with them or get them to tell you their story makes a difference. I'm amazed, even in the short time that I've been here, I have had a chance to get out and visit with some folks. And my senior enlisted leader and I went to visit some of our security forces personnel that defend the gates and the installation at night, because they work 24/7, 365. So we went during a night shift exchange. It was like 9:30 or 10 o'clock on a Friday night. And a couple days later, I ran into one of them, and they're like, "Hey, ma'am, just really wanted to say thanks for coming. Nobody comes and visits the night shift." And so while it took not a whole lot of time out of our schedule, it had an impact. And if it had an impact on one person, then to me that made all the difference. But I find just finding opportunities to celebrate people and their contributions really goes a long way. Now, other people are motivated by other things, so I'm glad that we have formal recognition programs. we've partnered with our public affairs team. We do what's called an Arctic Warrior of the Week, where every week we get to go out and recognize someone, and our public affairs team helps share their story. And so they get to share photos of them being recognized back with their family, wherever their family may be, or friends. And so that seems to be going very well. But I think just some people just want to be thanked for their efforts. And so finding those opportunities for that informal appreciation and recognition can go a long way.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat.
I have a question. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for your service, Kirsten Aguilar. I was really interested. You have so much educational and institutional knowledge, so much experiential knowledge. You referenced Simon Sinek as well. Love his reads too. And just wondering if you have any other recommendations on leadership learnings, books, resources, any other resources that you'd recommend in advancing knowledge, or just kind of good reads in general.
Yeah, so Simon Sinek actually did a series for us here at JBER a couple of months ago with our new NCOs that were going to be senior non-commissioned leaders. And so I think any of his books or his TED Talks are fantastic. I did get a book recommendation just today. I will tell you, I have not listened to it, but the person was so impassioned about it that I wrote it down, and I'm going to take a look at it. It's called Daring Greatly. Maybe some of you have already read it. Yeah, I'm getting a couple of head nods. So that is definitely one. And then two that I would offer, and this is not military leadership by any means per se, but it's more about life and in general. I recommend Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters for anyone that is a father who has a daughter, and then the equivalent Strong Mothers, Strong Sons for anyone who has sons out there. And then honestly, one of the greatest books that I have read. I'm a huge sports fan. I love all kinds of sports, but the book Moneyball, and it was made into a movie by Brad Pitt. But that, when I went to the Naval War College, that was on the Chief of Naval Operations reading list, was Moneyball. And so each semester we had to read at least one book on the CNO's reading list. And some of the books did not spark my attention, and so that one definitely sparked my attention. And I was amazed at how much more than just science behind mathematics associated with sports teams was in that book. So that would be another book that I would recommend. And there, I mean, there's so many out there. There's definitely a wide variety of books out there, but I think I'm definitely partial to Simon Sinek.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
We had a couple questions related to leading during the pandemic. Heather Marone, do you want to kick one of those off?
Yeah, so you mentioned you assumed leadership of JBER right in the middle of the pandemic this past summer. How have you managed that, and how has it been like, I'm assuming it would be difficult because you can't engage in some of the ways that we would engage in the past, especially when you're meeting a whole bunch of new people and they're meeting you for the first time. Can you talk about how you pivoted and adjusted, and how you're connecting with your command during COVID?
Yeah, so I will admit that has been one of my greatest challenges. So this is a 24-month assignment for me. And so here we are in January of 2021. So again, I'm a big sports fan. So a quarter of my command tour is behind me. And so when I got here, I had a whole year to plan and think about and study JBER and what was happening here locally in the Muni, and some of the things that were going on. And so I had big lofty plans that I kind of had to say, okay, let's, like you said, how do we pivot to these? And so part of what we do typically is you have a big ceremony. Lots of people get to see the visual representation of the change of command, and so they know that authority has gone from one person to another. We didn't get to have that, and unfortunately this year JBER didn't get to have the open house that they normally would have had, and my arrival was scheduled during some of those events. And so one thing that our PA team, which I'm a huge fan of our PA team, they helped my family and I just kind of do a welcome video. And so they came into our home and they filmed my husband and my 2 kids. My oldest was away at college. And we just got to see a little bit about who the Aguilar family is. And so it gave us a chance to at least get that out so people could know who we are. And then I got out and about and started, I have a vision where, because this organization is so large, I was making it a point to spend a whole day, no meetings, no nothing, a whole day with one unit. And we had a plan to do this. It was going to happen before the end of the calendar year. And I think we've got through 6 of our 15 organizations. And then COVID got really elevated in the October area or timeframe. So we put those on hold, but did get a chance to spend a whole day just with a couple of our units. And really my purpose was to get to know people as much as possible, to really understand the individual unit's mission, what they do for the community. But again, it was an opportunity to highlight to everybody else what the folks do. So whether it was our engineers, who I got to spend 2 days with our engineers, or our medics, who I got to spend some time with our medics. And next up is our logistics team and our contracting team and our security forces. And so I'm really looking forward to those continuing, but tried to find those moments where we could do things in a safe and responsible manner. But I will say, not being able to engage with large groups of people has been difficult. So one of the things my senior enlisted leader and I have started to do is we do a couple times a month, we'll do an hour with a group of people similar to this. So just a couple days ago, we talked with some of our junior folks. We were on a Teams call with them, and it was just an hour. We call it Commander in Chief Chat. Just an opportunity to just chat with them. And I told them, we can talk about anything that you want. I said, it doesn't have to be military related. You can ask any questions you want. We can debate whether or not Wonder Woman 1984 is good or not, because I've not seen it, but I've heard both spectrums of it. But trying to find those opportunities to just connect, even if it's with a smaller group of people. But I will say that has been hard. The other challenge that we have experienced has just been communication flow. And also getting people to understand decisions without letting them into the entire decision-making process. And so a lot of times decisions are made and they are based on as best knowledge that we have, medical intel, if you will, assessing the circumstances, looking at what we are being asked to do at JBER, because as you know, we execute national defense right here from Alaska, and we do that from JBER. And so there are things that we are being asked to do by our nation and by our defense leaders. And so how do we continue to do those and meet those needs while minimizing our risk and keeping our families safe? And so I think a lot of times people aren't necessarily happy with certain decisions that were made. And I try to tell people, I have a family too. Again, my kiddos are super excited about the chance to go to school, but we don't always have the opportunity or the necessity, for that matter, to explain all of the factors that go into a decision. But sometimes it's important that people understand what our objective is. So we've tried to outline what our COVID objectives are, what we're trying to do. And when we've been able to ease up on restrictions, as we have over the last couple of weeks, similar to what the Muni did as well, communicate to people what that looked like. And there's no national response. We know this, right? And so a lot of times people, they're like, well, that doesn't make any sense, or this doesn't make any sense, or if the Muni's doing this, why are you doing this? And so we haven't been aligned completely, 100%. I was in contact with the acting mayor over the last several months. I was in contact with her predecessor before that. And so we're trying to make sure that we're communicating as much as possible, but it's really hard to make sure that folks that are receiving it understand the why behind it, or what does this really mean for me? And the reality is, we can't plan for every possible scenario. So yes, sometimes there are exceptions. Sometimes there are things that we just didn't think of. It goes back to my comment about meetings and allowing others the opportunity to provide input. And so I have said, please provide us that feedback, because it's not that we aren't caring about it. We just, unfortunately, we had a blind spot, and we just needed to be able to know that that was an issue, and let's take a look at it. And so, but I think those are kind of in the two biggest challenges with regards to COVID, is just getting to connect with people, and then also communication.
Thank you. Anyone else from our audience have a question?
I have one. You said that this is Lisa Butler. You said that you didn't think that you were qualified for this position, but you went ahead and applied for it. Could you give us a little bit more background on that? Because in WLEAD, we discussed that a lot, is that sometimes women don't step up.
Yeah, so honestly, I think the reason why I felt that way is because across the Air Force, the position that I'm in, which is called an air base wing, there aren't many of them. And so the year that I competed for this position, I want to say that there were 12 or 13 openings across the Air Force. And so just mathematically, knowing that there were 500 or so people eligible for them, I just didn't think that mathematically odds were not in my favor, if you will. And then when I made the candidate list, I think there were 20 of us, 19 or 20 of us on the list. So I will say I had a little bit more confidence after knowing 500 people competed, and I was one of the 19 or so that made the cut. But then it was the challenge of, okay, now we got to skinny that down even further. And so at that point, I was more confident, and I was hopeful that, again, all that experience that I've had, the familiarity with the Pacific AOR, but I didn't have any experience in Alaska. And so I didn't know how much that was going to be weighed on whether or not that was going to be a factor. Because a lot of times people have been stationed in one place and then they get another opportunity because they're a known quantity, right? People know who they are. I think one thing that worked in my favor is when the list came out, there were a couple of people in the hiring process that recognized my name from other assignments. And so I had the opportunity to, like I said, convey my desires for wanting to come here. But I think for me, it was really more of just wow, this is, there's a lot of people that are competing, and there are a lot of talented people that I am competing with. And so that was kind of my hesitation. It was, I just didn't think it was going to happen. But like I said, I was not going to be shy. And I think up until that point, there's a balance that we have, right? We don't want to come across too strong because we don't want to be seen as, I didn't want anyone to think I was holding anybody hostage, if you will. It wasn't that it was JBER or bust. It was, if you're asking me where I would like to go for this command opportunity, this is where I want to go, and here's all the reasons why I think I'm qualified, and this is why I want you to strongly consider me. So that was really kind of the thought process behind it. But just initially, it was to your point, right? I could have just said, nope, I'm not even going to bother trying, and I figured I got like a 5% chance, and so all they're going to do is say no, and I'll move on to another opportunity. So fortunately, that wasn't the case. But thanks for the question.
Well, we're sure glad that it worked out and that you're here.
Thank
we're
you.
so thankful for your leadership. We do have a comment in the chat from Gary. He's wondering, how does leadership style in the U.S. military differ from that of other countries' armed forces?
You know, that's a very fascinating question, and it varies depending on the country. So when I was hired to work on the Pacific Command staff, I was on a personal staff for a 3-star who was the deputy commander. And during my interview, he said to me, he said, Kirsten, I need you to understand that not every country in the Pacific sees women in leadership positions. He said, we're going to travel to other countries, and they are going to assume that you're a member of my staff, meaning my personal staff. He said, or they will assume that you are not a decision maker. And I said, okay, sir. He said, but I will tell you that you will be by my side everywhere we go. And he was true to his word in that. And there were some small countries that we did travel to where initially I was not invited into the discussion. It's just because in their country, women don't hold those positions of authority. And I never experienced that before. Honestly, I'd never felt disadvantaged nor advantaged for an opportunity in my career because I was a female. And maybe that's because I grew up in the human resource arena where my career field is about 45-50% balance between males and females. I didn't grow up in a male-dominated career field. I grew up in a male-dominated organization, if you will. But that was the first time where I really was exposed to just how other countries, they just different values, different perspectives. And there was one instance where I wouldn't say it got heated, but he was just adamant about it. And you could tell that they weren't happy, but that they conceded because the value of the meeting was more important to them than fighting whether or not I got to come into the room. So it's a good question, though.
Thanks for that. We have about 5 minutes left, so I just wanted to have one more question. What type of advice would you give to your younger self?
You know, I love this question. Whenever I do interviews with folks for a job, or when some of our enlisted folks want to pursue officer training programs, I hit them with, okay, dear younger me, right? So what would you say to dear younger me? And I think what I would say to dear younger me is only you are going to limit yourself. And you don't always have to prove yourself. And what I mean by that, I go back to my statement where I never felt advantaged or disadvantaged for being a woman. But I did find myself as a young captain, very motivated, very eager, that I always felt like I had to prove myself. And it wasn't because I was a woman. It was just because I wanted people to have confidence in me as an individual and as me as a leader. And I felt maybe I focused too much on that, and I missed out on some opportunities to connect with people and help other people around me rise. And so what I would say to a young lieutenant, or what I do say to a young lieutenant or a young captain is, you don't always have to be perfect. It's okay. And certainly if you do make a mistake, just own it and admit it and move forward. The other thing that I would say is it's okay to be vulnerable. I think too many times as leaders, we hesitate to be vulnerable, to admit we've made a mistake or we've exercised poor judgment, because again, we don't want people to lose confidence in us. But I have found that people tend to be more relatable to that, because they see that, okay, you know, she's a person too. I remember when I was a young captain and I looked to somebody in my position and I was like, man, they have got it all together. And so when my husband and I found out we were coming here, we went to a course for commanders and spouses, and we joked, but not really. I was like, ooh, we're going to get our book that has all the answers. Of course, there's no book that has the answers. And I think it's important that people get to know my family and see me. And so when we have to put out a policy or make a decision, I tell people, I said, listen, I'm not jazzed about virtual learning as well. And let me tell you something, online kindergarten is hard and it's exhausting, but I understand why these decisions have been made. And I share that with you because it helps you understand that when I say I know how you feel, trust me, I know how you feel. Or I had a teenager and a toddler. So that the struggle in the Aguilar family was real. And I think it's important for other folks that are going through struggles to realize that I tell people there's not really nothing different from me than you, other than I've been in the Air Force longer and I've had other opportunities and training which qualify me to do this position. But I think going back to the heart of the question, dear younger me, don't be afraid to be vulnerable, and only you are going to limit yourself. That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah, that goes right in line with the book that you're about to read, Daring Greatly.
Oh, good. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, your service, your leadership, and I want to be respectful. It's 12:59, And thank you again for taking
Thank
the time
you.
to chat with
Thank you.
us.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I do look forward to another one, maybe in the future in person. That would be great. But thank you so much for reaching out and giving me the opportunity to speak with you today.
Yeah, we would love that. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great weekend.
You
Bye.
too. Thank you.
Thank you.